Memory of teaching Arbella was actually before it was Arbella. Actually, I was hired in the fall of 1975 and to teach two drum corps that had been parade corps, the Comets and the Rockettes. And it was great for me because I was a college student. I was actually going to Salem State, so it was a really good job for me. It was really local. And so I started teaching the corps. Neither of the corps had enough members really to be successful as a field corps. So what eventually ended up happening, probably right around the end of the year there in '75, was that they turned it into one corps. And they came up with the name Arbella after the ship. And we proceeded to try to put a corps together we could put into Class B. And I remember at the time that the corps merged, some of the other instructors had left the organization, and I ended up recruiting Peter Fernari to come and teach drums. And Peter and I worked, and actually it was kind of interesting. Peter and I had a goal, and it was kind of funny because we were just trying to put a corps in the field, but Peter and I wanted to have a DCI all-girl championship before we stopped teaching. So that was one of the goals we put in place. But I remember 1976 was really a challenge because so few of the kids really had any experience. None of them had marched, and many of them had not marched in a competitive drum corps. A lot of them didn't really know how to play their instrument. So it was a lot of, from the ground up work. But it was a really fun experience too because I got to teach kids who hadn't played before. So I got to teach them what I thought was proper technique. We were very fortunate in 1976. We had a very light schedule. I think we only had 8 or 9 competitive shows. I'll always remember the very first show, sitting in the stands watching the corps compete and being so nervous that we didn't even know if they'd get through it. But Donna Daly, who had been the drill instructor for the corps for many, many years, was actually sitting in front of me in the stands. And I remember she was just so blown away by the fact that the corps had not just competed and been able to get through the routine, but the fact that they were actually pretty good. She was literally crying with joy. And we sat there listening to the scores being announced, and we're absolutely amazed that the corps actually came in second in that very first contest. And the corps ended up doing pretty well that year, and it was a really good foundation for the rest of what we were trying to do. 1977 was another excellent year where we were able to build the kids who we had. Most of them stayed, and we were able to build and do a little bit more challenging things musically and percussion-wise with Peter. And we ended up doing very well and being very competitive in Class B in 1977. In fact, in the World Open in 1977, on a lark, we decided to enter them in the Class A preliminaries, just for experience. We didn't have a long enough show to actually compete, so we knew we were going to get penalized. Well, we actually made the finals that year, in 1977, which was really an amazing accomplishment. But the thing I remember most about that is as instructors, we were just so excited that we actually made the finals of this show and had beaten many corps that we really never would have thought we could have beaten. We made the finals, but we didn't have a long enough show, so we had a lot of penalties in the finals, and we came in last in the finals. And I just remember being down in Arbella Hall with all the kids, and a lot of them were crying because they came in last. We had to convince them that it's okay. We didn't have a long enough show. We really weren't expecting to make the finals. But we remembered that, and as instructors, we said, we're not going to get in this situation again. So in 1978, which was the year I believe we were undefeated in both circuits in Class B. In fact, I think some people tried to push us up to Class A that year. During the year, we added a piece of an additional piece of the show that we could splice in the event that we made the finals in any of those competitions. In the 1978 Class A preliminaries, we ended up placing third, which was great. And then we ended up, right after that, going right back to Bertram Field and practicing the full show, the Class A length show, so that we could be competitive at night. I'll never forget this. Sitting in the stands, listening to the scores being announced, 7th place, 6th place, 5th place, 4th place. I remember just getting so nervous thinking that I can't believe we are scoring this high against these other corps. We actually came in second in that competition that night, which was absolutely amazing. And the trophy for that competition that we won was a large silver bowl, which the instructors proceeded to steal and drink champagne out of on our way to Pennsylvania. which was really kind of a fun trip. We actually packed, the four of us, me, Dick Pelletier, Peter Finari, and my brother Michael, packed into Dick's Volkswagen and traveled to Pennsylvania with the Corps, which was pretty amazing. You could have seen us coming out of that car at some of the rest stops. It looked pretty bad. But that was amazing, and 1978 was a pivotal year in terms of actually getting the kids ready to compete in Class A, which would happen in 1979. In 1979, we knew this was going to be like a peak year for us. We're going to be in Class A, there's going to be a lot of competition, and it was going to be probably a difficult year for us to be as competitive as we had been. In Class B in 1978, it was so easy because we had, the experience the kids had and the confidence they had. We were able to compete and essentially, win contests without even having to work that hard. But in 1979, we knew we'd have a challenge competing against corps like North Star and the Boston Crusaders and corps like that. So in 1979, Peter and I sat down to try to plan out what the repertoire would look like to make it challenging enough so that we can compete in the higher level with the higher level competition, but also conservative enough that we knew we could execute, we could perform well. In 1979, we sat down, planned out the show, planned out how we were going to do it, and we set the goal for the kids. Our goal was we were Class A, we wanted to be all-girl champions, and that was a big mantra throughout the whole year, was really focusing on that. I think looking back on it, a lot of kids might think that 1979 wasn't as much fun as 1978. It was a lot of hard work, but we were very successful. And I can say this, the Arbella made the finals of every competition that we ever entered in, which is something I can't say about my career as a drum corps person. I competed in the Cardinals. There were many finals we didn't make. So we made the finals in the Drum Corps East Championship. We made the finals in the World Open. Obviously won Class A, won the DCI All-Girl as well as the World Open. One story that people probably don't know about, very interesting story, is about the 1979 DCI Birmingham Championship. In the preliminaries, we lost to the Ventures by 4.6, which is a very large spread. As instructors, we were demoralized. I know the kids were really down because they felt, we'd come all this way. We were really expected to, they expected to win, and we didn't. We came in second, and by 4.6. The instructors immediately proceeded to go to the DCI headquarters hotel bar and order 2 Black Russians each because we figured, what are we going to do? I mean, we really were in a bad spot. Well, we ended up figuring out where we needed to improve. We had really been beaten in the marching execution score quite badly. And so we focused on that. And even the kids will tell you, if you ask them, in Birmingham that year, those 4 or 5 rehearsal days that we had between the prelims and the finals, they were marching around with signs on their back to remind them how much distance to have and various other things that Dick Pelletier beat into their skulls. But to make a long story short, we were able to actually win marching execution by 1/10 of a point in the finals, which was proved to be a pretty significant thing. Another thing that people who have been drum corps a long time may remember is in the finals, the Ventures were on after us. So we competed, we did a very good job, instructors were ecstatic with the show, but then we watched the Ventures. In the Ventures show, they had a very sophisticated show, they were a very good drum corps, and at the end of their show, the timers judge failed to fire. The timers judge was, at that time, they shot blanks. They shot 2 blank shots to announce that that was the end of the competitive time that they would mark execution. Well, the gun never fired, so the timing and penalties judge had to run around the field telling the judges to stop judging. It became a source of controversy because a lot of people thought that maybe the Ventures lost a few tenths of a point during that time. Well, I just remember that standing on the track, waiting for the scores to be announced, and our corps holding each other's hands, waiting for the scores to be announced. And when they announced in second place with 0.2 in penalties, we looked at each other thinking, oh, that's it. We had dropped 2 little pieces of flags onto the field. But Donna turned to us and said, no, they did not mark those as penalty points. And at that point, we knew we had won. And they announced that we had won. I'll remember that the kids didn't move on the field. They just raised their arms in victory and down, a really class act that Dick had instilled in them. As instructors, we were going crazy on the sidelines, throwing things and jumping up and down and screaming. But a very successful time. And one thing I remember the most about teaching the Arbella is the fact that the kids had a lot of confidence in themselves because they worked so hard and because they dedicated themselves to being the best. And we ultimately were able to achieve that. And one thing I'll always be proud of is that we set a goal and we reached it.